The noose was already around my neck, rough hemp rope scratching against my throat. Commander Alaric stood before me, grinning with cruel satisfaction. 300 Viking soldiers watched in silence as their brutal leader prepared to hang me for the crime of defending an old woman. "Any last words, soldier?" Erik mocked. "Before you die for daring to defy your commander's orders." I looked him in the eye. Viking honor demands we protect the weak, not abuse them for coin. "Honor?" Erik laughed. "You speak of honor while facing execution? Your honor dies with you today, rebel." He raised his hand to signal the executioner. But then, horns sounded in the distance. Deep, powerful, the king's horns. Erik's smile faltered. If you love stories where the underdog wins, hit that subscribe button now. This gets so much better. My name is Alaric, commander of King Harald's Royal Guard, highest-ranking Viking officer in the kingdom. But for the past 3 weeks, I've been living as Bjorn, a simple new recruit in Commander Alaric garrison. Why? Because King Harald received troubling reports about this outpost. Villagers complained of excessive taxation. Soldiers whispered of brutal punishments. Merchants refused to trade here. "I need someone I trust to investigate," Harald told me privately. "Go undercover as a new soldier. See if Erik is the leader we need, or a tyrant who's forgotten Viking honor." So I disguised myself, cut my hair short, wore common armor instead of my decorated plate. Arrived at Erik's garrison claiming to be a farmer's son seeking warrior glory. Nobody questioned it. New recruits arrived monthly from surrounding villages. The first week, I watched. Erik ruled through fear. Any soldier who questioned orders faced public beatings. Any villager who complained about taxes was thrown in the dungeon. The garrison wasn't protecting the people, it was oppressing them. But I needed proof. I needed to witness Erik's cruelty firsthand before reporting to the king. The proof came on my 3rd week. Market day. Villagers brought grain, meat, and crafts to sell. Standard practice. Garrison takes 10% tax for protection. Fair exchange. The soldiers guard trade routes. Villagers pay reasonable tribute. But Erik had different ideas. "New tax rate," he announced in the market square, surrounded by armed guards. 30%, effective immediately. The villagers protested. An old merchant stood forward. "Commander, that's triple the traditional rate. We can't survive on 70% of our harvest. Our families will starve." "Then work harder," Erik said coldly. "Or leave. I don't care which." "But this violates King Harald's law. The tax rate is set at 10% kingdom-wide." Erik's face darkened. "The king isn't here. I am. And in this garrison, my word is law." He gestured to his guards. "Collect the tribute. Anyone who refuses, seize their entire stock." I stood among the other soldiers, watching this Viking commander abuse his authority. My hands clenched into fists. This was exactly what King Harald feared, a petty tyrant using power to enrich himself at villagers' expense. An old woman approached, carrying a basket of bread. Her hands shook as she offered it. "Commander, this is all I have. My grandson is sick. I need to sell this bread to buy medicine. Please, the old tax rate was already difficult." Erik grabbed the basket. 30% means 3 loaves. But, since you complained, I'm taking 5. He dumped half her bread into his personal sack. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "My grandson will die without medicine." "Not my problem," Erik shoved her. She stumbled, falling hard onto the cobblestones. Her basket scattered. The remaining bread rolled into the mud. The soldiers around me looked away, ashamed but silent. They'd learned that defying Erik meant punishment. But I wasn't really a soldier in Erik's command. I was King Harald's highest officer, and I'd seen enough Viking dishonor for one day. I stepped forward, picked up the muddy bread, helped the old woman to her feet. Then I turned to face Erik. "This is not Viking honor, Commander," I said quietly. "We're supposed to protect these people, not rob them." The market square went silent. Every eye turned to me, the new recruit, the nobody, daring to challenge the garrison commander. Erik stared at me. His face turned red with rage. "What did you say, soldier?" "I said this isn't Viking honor, Commander." My voice stayed steady, even though my heart hammered. "We're warriors, not thieves." Erik's face went from red to purple. A vein pulsed in his temple. He stepped close enough that I could smell the mead on his breath and see the rage burning in his eyes. "You dare question me?" His voice was deadly quiet, more dangerous than shouting. "You're a recruit, 3 weeks in my garrison, and you think you understand honor better than I do?" I could feel every eye on us, the villagers holding their breath, the soldiers watching to see if anyone would finally stand up to Erik's cruelty. This moment would define everything. "I understand that Viking commanders protect their people," I said, "not terrorize them for extra coin." The slap came so fast I barely saw it. Erik's gauntleted hand cracked across my face. The metal split my lip. I tasted blood, warm and copper, flooding my mouth. My head snapped sideways. For a second, I saw stars. "Insubordination," Erik announced to the gathered crowd. His voice carried across the market square. "This soldier has openly defied his commander, questioned my authority, insulted my Viking honor in front of civilians." I straightened up, spit blood onto the cobblestones. "The only insult to honor here is stealing bread from starving grandmothers." Would you stand up to a cruel commander knowing it meant certain punishment? Tell me in the comments what you'd do. Erik's eyes went cold. "Guards, seize him. 20 lashes for insubordination. Then 3 days in the dungeon. Maybe that will teach him respect." 4 soldiers grabbed my arms. I didn't resist. I needed to see how far Erik would go, how deep his Viking betrayal of duty ran. The more evidence I gathered, the stronger King Harald's case would be. They dragged me to the whipping post in the garrison courtyard. Rough, wooden pole worn smooth by countless backs pressed against it. They chained my wrists above my head, tore my tunic away. The autumn air bit at my bare skin. Erik stood behind me. I heard the whistle of the lash cutting through air. Then, white-hot pain exploded across my shoulders. The leather strips bit deep. I gritted my teeth, refused to scream. That's what he wanted. My suffering on display. "Count them," Erik ordered, "and think about your precious honor with each strike." 2, 3, 4. By the 10th lash, blood ran down my back in hot streams. By 15, I could barely stay conscious. The pain was everything, all-consuming. Each breath sent fresh agony through torn flesh. 20. The final lash fell. I slumped against the post, held up only by the chains. Through blurred vision, I saw villagers watching, some crying, some looking away in shame. And Erik? Erik was smiling. "Take him to the dungeon," he commanded. "No food, no water. Let him rot for 3 days, maybe longer if I'm still feeling insulted." The dungeon was exactly what you'd expect. Dark, cold, damp stone, walls that sweated moisture. The smell hit me first. Human waste, mold, and despair. They threw me into a cell. My back screamed as I hit the filthy straw. The door clanged shut, iron lock clicking with finality. I lay there in the darkness. Every movement sent fresh pain through my shredded back, but my mind was clear. I had my proof now. Erik's cruelty, his abuse of power, his complete disregard for Viking law and King Harald's authority. I just needed to survive long enough to report it. I lost track of time in that cell. Hours blurred into each other. No light reached the dungeon except a thin sliver from the barred window high above. My back was on fire. The wounds from the lashing had crusted over with dried blood, but every breath reopened them slightly. I could feel the warm trickle running down my spine, soaking into the filthy straw beneath me. The third night, I heard footsteps. Soft, careful. Not the heavy boots of guards. Someone was trying to be quiet. A figure appeared at my cell bars. Small, hooded. When she pushed back the hood, I recognized her. The old woman from the market, the one whose bread Erik had stolen. "Why are you here?" I whispered, my throat raw from thirst. "Because you defended me," she said quietly. Her wrinkled hands pushed a water skin through the bars. "No one has stood up to Commander Alaric in 2 years. Not since he had the last brave soldier executed for questioning his orders." I drank greedily. The water was cold, clean, tasting like salvation. Executed? For what crime? Treason, Erik called it. The soldier reported Erik's excessive taxation to a traveling merchant, hoping word would reach King Harald. When Erik found out, he claimed the soldier was spreading lies to undermine Viking authority. Had him hanged in the square as a warning. My blood ran cold. Erik wasn't just cruel. He was murdering soldiers who tried to report his crimes. This was worse than King Harald suspected. "You need to leave," I told her. "If Erik finds you helping me..." "He'll do what? Take my bread again?" She smiled sadly. "I'm old. My grandson died 3 days ago. Couldn't afford the medicine after Erik took my goods. I have nothing left to lose." The words hit me like a physical blow. Her grandson, dead, because Erik wanted extra coins for his personal treasury. This wasn't just abuse of power. This was murder through greed. Would you risk everything to help a stranger who defended you? Share your answer below. She disappeared into the shadows. I sat in the darkness, rage burning, hotter than the pain in my back. When King Harald learned about this, Erik would face more than demotion. He'd face execution for violating every principle of Viking leadership. But I needed to survive first. The next morning, guards came. They weren't bringing food. They were dragging me out. My legs barely held me as they hauled me up the dungeon stairs. Bright sunlight blinded me after days in darkness. I blinked, trying to focus. We were in the garrison courtyard. Every soldier stood in formation. The entire village had been assembled, forced to watch. And in the center stood a wooden platform with a noose hanging from a beam. My execution. Erik stood on the platform, arms crossed, looking down at me with satisfaction. "Bring the traitor forward." They pushed me up the steps. My bare feet, numb from the cold dungeon floor, felt the rough wood planks beneath them. The noose swayed slightly in the morning breeze. "Bjorn the recruit," Erik announced loudly. "You are hereby sentenced to death for treason against your commanding officer, for spreading dissent among the ranks, for questioning Viking authority, for undermining military discipline." "I questioned your cruelty," I said, my voice hoarse but carrying across the silent crowd. "Not Viking authority. There's a difference." "Silence!" Erik backhanded me. Fresh blood filled my mouth. "You have dishonored this garrison, dishonored your commander, dishonored the Viking code. The punishment is death." He grabbed the noose, looped it over my head. The rough hemp rope scratched against my throat, just like I described at the beginning. This was it, the moment where everything would change. "Any last words, soldier?" Erik mocked. I looked past him, looked at the assembled villagers, the frightened soldiers, the old woman standing in the back, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Viking honor demands we protect the weak," I said, "not abuse them for coin." Erik's hand raised to signal the executioner. And that's when I heard them, the king's horns. The sound of those horns froze everyone. Deep, powerful, unmistakable. The three-note pattern that announced King Harald's presence. Every soldier in the courtyard straightened instinctively. Even Erik's hand, raised to signal my execution, hesitated mid-air. "The king?" Erik's voice cracked slightly. He hadn't been expecting royal inspection. No warning, no time to hide evidence of his cruelty. Why would King Harald come to this outpost? The garrison gates burst open. 20 royal guards rode in on massive war horses. Their armor gleamed, red cloaks billowed. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were the king's personal Viking warriors, elite, deadly, loyal. And behind them, on a black stallion that seemed to devour the ground with each step, rode King Harald himself. He was an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered. His beard was threaded with gray, but his eyes were sharp as a hawk's. He wore the crown of elk horns that marked him as ruler of all Nordic territories. Every person in that courtyard dropped to one knee, including Erik, who scrambled off the execution platform so fast he nearly tripped. Except me. I couldn't kneel with a noose around my neck and my hands bound. I just stood there, swaying slightly, wondering if Harald had arrived in time or if I'd die before he could intervene. The king dismounted. His boots hit the cobblestones with heavy thuds that echoed in the silence. He surveyed the scene, the execution platform, the noose around my neck, my bloodied back, the terrified villagers, the assembled soldiers who looked ashamed. "Commander Alaric," Harald's voice was cold enough to freeze fire. "What exactly is happening here?" Erik rose, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, an unexpected honor. We are conducting a lawful execution. This soldier committed treason against his commanding officer." "Treason." Harald walked slowly toward the platform, each step deliberate, measured. "Explain the crime." "He questioned my authority, my king, spread dissent among the ranks, defended villagers who refused to pay proper taxation. He undermined military discipline and Viking honor. Would you stay silent, watching an innocent man hang, or speak truth to power?" Comment below. Harald climbed the platform steps, stood face to face with me. His eyes searched mine. I saw recognition there, a flicker of something, relief maybe, or anger at what had been done to his highest commander. "Remove the noose," Harald commanded quietly. "But your majesty," Erik started. "Now!" The king's voice cracked like thunder. A guard scrambled forward, fumbled with the rope. The noose loosened. I could breathe again. The rough hemp lifted away from my raw throat, leaving a burning ring where it had pressed into skin. Harald turned to face Erik and the assembled crowd. "You claim this man committed treason by questioning your authority?" "Yes, your majesty. He defied direct orders, challenged my Viking leadership." "Publicly. Did he question your orders specifically, or did he question your cruelty?" Erik's face paled slightly. He spoke against my tax collection policies necessary to maintain this garrison's security." "Tax collection?" Harald's expression darkened. "I set the kingdom tax rate at 10%. What rate are you charging these villagers?" Silence. Erik's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "What rate?" Harald roared. 30%, my king," a villager's voice called from the crowd. The old woman, brave even now. "And when we protested, he beat us, stole our goods, threw dissenters in the dungeon." Harald's jaw clenched. His hands formed fists. "You tripled my tax rate? Brutalized civilians under your protection? And when a soldier defended them, you called it treason?" "They were being difficult, your majesty. Discipline was necessary." "Discipline?" Harald's voice shook the courtyard walls. "I'll show you discipline, Erik. But first, I need to introduce you to someone." He turned to me, placed a hand on my shoulder. The touch was gentle, careful of my wounded back. "This man you were about to execute," Harald said, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard, "is not a simple recruit named Bjorn." Erik's eyes widened. Confusion and dawning horror crossed his face. "This," Harald continued, "is Commander Alaric, the highest-ranking officer in my royal guard, my most trusted advisor, and the man I sent here 3 weeks ago to investigate reports of your Viking corruption." The courtyard exploded in gasps and murmurs. Erik staggered backward, his face drained of all color. "Commander Alaric?" His voice was barely a whisper. "But you said you were a farmer's son, a new recruit." I lied. I looked him in the eye. "King Harald sent me undercover to investigate, and I found everything he feared: excessive taxation, brutal punishments, murder of soldiers who tried to report your crimes." The old woman pushed through the crowd. "My grandson died because this Viking commander stole the money I needed for medicine. He's been terrorizing us for 2 years. Other villagers joined her, a flood of voices, stories of beatings, stolen goods, families destroyed by Erik's greed. The soldiers stood silent, shame written on their faces. They'd known, they'd watched it happen, too afraid to act. King Harald listened to every testimony. His face grew darker with each story. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. "Commander Erik," Harald said coldly, "you are stripped of rank, effective immediately." "Your Majesty, please." "Silence!" The king's voice was absolute authority. "You abused your position, violated my laws, murdered your own soldiers, terrorized civilians under your protection. You've dishonored everything Viking leadership represents." Erik dropped to his knees. "I only wanted to serve the kingdom, to maintain order." "You wanted to fill your pockets." Harald gestured to the guards. "Search his quarters. I suspect we'll find his extra tax revenue hidden away." They did search, returned minutes later carrying a chest. When they opened it, gold coins spilled onto the cobblestones, hundreds of them, stolen from villagers over 2 years of corrupt rule. Harald turned to me. "Commander Alaric, as highest-ranking officer and the wronged party, you have the right to determine Erik's punishment. What sentence do you demand?" I looked at Erik, this man who'd whipped me, starved me, nearly executed me for defending an old woman. Part of me wanted to demand blood eagle, watch him suffer as others had suffered. But then I looked at the villagers. They didn't need more violence. They needed justice. They needed to know Viking honor still existed. "Strip him of all rank and property," I said. "Every coin in that chest goes back to the villagers he robbed. He works in the fields for 1 year, manual labor. Let him understand what it means to survive on 70% of harvest. After that, exile. He never wears Viking armor again." Harald nodded approval. "A measured sentence, justice without excess, cruelty. This is true Viking leadership." He turned to Erik. "You're fortunate. Commander Alaric has more honor than you ever did. Carry out the sentence." Guards dragged Erik away. He didn't fight, didn't protest, just hung his head in shame as they stripped his armor piece by piece. The king addressed the garrison. "Let this be a lesson. Power is not for personal gain. Leadership is service. Any commander who forgets this will face the same fate." Dismissed. As soldiers dispersed, Harald approached me. "That was well done, Alaric. The measured punishment, the focus on restitution. I learned from the best, Your Majesty." "Your back needs treatment. We'll get you to the healers." He paused. "And when you've recovered, I have another assignment. Reports from the Eastern Territories." I smiled despite the pain. "More undercover work?" "Someone needs to keep my commanders honest, and you've proven you're willing to suffer for truth." 3 weeks later, I stood in that same courtyard, healed, restored to my rank. The garrison had a new commander, fair, just. The villagers smiled again. The old woman brought me bread, not as tribute, as thanks. "You gave up everything to defend me," she said. "A stranger." "Viking honor demands we protect the weak," I told her. "That's not negotiable, not even when facing execution. If you believe leaders should serve their people, not exploit them, hit that subscribe button now. Tell me in the comments, would you go undercover to expose corruption, knowing the danger? In the world of Vikings, true honor is tested when no one knows your rank. Real leadership means choosing justice over revenge, and every tale begins with a lie and ends with blood. Skål, warriors, until the next saga.